Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works, and it's part something of our Dodge Wrecker, our heavy truck. And I'm actually had a small setback. I had made a mold for the latches. Let's try to get it on camera for the latches here. And I had peeled it off the master and I set it down, and I don't know where it went. The problem with these latex molds is they look like little blobs of snot, especially if it's a small one, and who knows where it went. So I'm creating another one that's going to take a couple of days. This mold here is what I'm going to be using to make the main winch, which is going to go right about here. And this actually came from the front bumper of the Italy Ford Wrecker kit. So I'm going to be using that to make the main winch. So I'm going to be starting on the main business part here, the upright, and of course the bracing and the boom. That's what we're going to be working on. What we have here is the start of the I'm not sure if the head frame. Not sure what this part's actually called. But the main winch gets mounted down here. And then there's another hand-operated winch mounted right around here. And hand-operated winch appears to operate a system of pulleys that go from this up here to the end of the boom. I suppose you basically adjusted the height of your boom before putting any load on it, because I would imagine even with several pulleys, you're not going to be picking up a truck with that. So this goes there-ish. And as I said, it's going to have a couple pulleys mounted on the top of it. And then there's two substantial beams that run from the bed of the truck, really the frame, up to this. And I wasn't happy with any of the evergreen styrene I-beams or anything that I had purchased. So what I've done is I've taken the largest I-beam I had and I've beefed up the top and bottom just to make it look a lot more substantial, because this seemed to have been the heaviest metal on the truck. And they will be fitting on. I suppose it'd be better if I turned it. And they will be going on thusly. I've got my 45s on. Well, not really 45s. I think the angle's more like 35. But you can see these are fairly substantial pieces here. Now there's still a lot more to go in. There needs to be an intermediate sort of a brace here that the winch goes onto, the smaller one. And then, of course, my main boom actually pivots from here. That'll probably be the next thing I start working on. So it looks like we've got more progress here than we really do. I've got our head frame here. I'm still kind of scratching my head about the arrangement of the pulleys. Basically, there's pulley here and here, and then there's two on the boom. But there only seems to be one line coming down to a hand-operated winch down here. So I have to figure out just exactly what arrangement the cables took. I can see basically one cable going through all of the pulleys in order to give you some mechanical advantage. I haven't quite figured that out yet. But anyway, that will require a metal bracket here that hand-operated winch will go on. And this guy right here, this is the front bumper winch from the Italy Ford Wrecker kit that I built a couple of years ago. Now, I didn't actually use the parts. I basically made a mold because, you know, I'm real cheap. So this will just have to have a couple of things touched up on it because it's a top and bottom part. And it will basically be mounted there. I know it's not exactly the same winch as what was on the tow truck, but it is a nice looking winch, so I'm going to use it. And then here we have the boom. And it is an unusual design in that you've got the the C channels running up, and then they bend together here. Then you have this central pipe, basically, and that's where the cable goes for the main lifting of the load. It goes from the winch into the tube, and then it comes out the end. And once again, this is from that Italy wrecker kit, and it's a part I molded myself. And I thought it looked good, so that's why it's on there. I will still need to put the hinge pin points on because this whole thing is supposed to pivot. So, progress is being made. Oh, one more thing. I finally have got my latches made for the storage boxes, and the masters for those came off of one of AMT's fire truck models. Very nice looking latches, and it doesn't take much effort to make a mold and produce those. So this can finally have its finished coat of gray put on it. So I've just got some things mocked up here. This is our boom, and it basically goes on a pivot point. This isn't glued on yet. And this just pops onto this hinge point here. Oh, it's gonna fight me. Arrgh. So what I've done here, and I did it underneath this part as well, is using a chisel blade. I just basically scraped the little non-skids off, so that way I'm going to get a better join, and I got a better join between these flat parts and the plastic, because otherwise you'd end up with it just basically touching the top of the little nubbies there. I don't know if that's the official term, but that's what I call them. So this is coming together. One change I did make earlier on, I had a... Oh, cool. Oh, that's going to set me back. This just snapped. It was obviously under stress. Anyway, I did have a more modern ending on here for the cable to come through. I've taken that off, and I'm going to be having a more of a traditional big pulley here on the end. I've got my taillight castings in place. This one's a bit different color because I probably didn't get the mixture quite right, so it dried a little more translucent. They'll be given a coat of chrome silver, and then I'll be hitting them with some Tamiya transparent red. I'm getting ready to put my decals on, and I'm doing this earlier than I normally would, mainly because on the cab I want to have the decals on, and I want to have this thing clear coated before I put the window glass in, so I'm doing the decals a little bit early. These white patches on the doors, they're because, of course, I'm using a clear decal film. So these areas here I want to be white, so they're basically, in the printing industry, they'd call that a drop. Basically, there's no color there, and they'll be white because the underlying material is white. So here we've got the truck numbers, and I usually do twice as many as I need because it's not going to cost you any more. You're still using an entire sheet no matter what. So I basically have 2 sets for the cab, and then I have 2 sets for the bed, and then I've got a variety of Chrysler logos here to go in various spots. So this is just bare metal foils, plain decal film. And I just went to Staples to have them photocopy it. The artwork I did on my steam-powered computer that's still running Microsoft Windows XP, and this was done on Corel Draw. Unfortunately, at some point, the file that allows you to save got crunched. So you can create all these wonderful graphics with it. You can print them, but you can't save them. So I had to make sure I had everything all ready to go imprint it, because I knew the next time the computer rebooted, that was it. It was going to be gone. So there is my homemade decal on there. It's, I think, maybe a little more translucent than I'd like. I could also put on the second one for each side, and that would densify it up a bit. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the door first and see what it looks like over top of that white patch. If the white patch really shows through, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically put on 2 layers of decals all the way around. So, but I do like the way that the pinstriping came out and the way it fits on and everything like that. So, like I said, I'm going to move on to the door, see how that works, and then I'll make a decision. So that's as I feared. You can see the white blob in behind it, which had to be there to get the logo on. So fortunately I did two sets of these things. Hopefully it will be enough, but by the time I put the second one on, it will be dense enough. We'll see. So we're jumping ahead 5 days, and I really haven't done as much as I would have liked. This door has 2 layers of decals on it. So basically the first sheet that I made up. And of course, you can see where the white still shows through. There's an awful lot of contrast because the decals are nice and thin, just like you want them to be. So I knew this wasn't going to be good enough. And I was kicking myself because, geez, you know, when I made the artwork on my old computer on CorelDRAW, which won't save because, as I mentioned earlier, there's some sort of a crushed file and it won't save. So all the while, Natasha's kind of looking at me like I get 10 heads, and then I realized, oh, I still have the original artwork that I used to make the photocopy. So I figure, okay, I'll just go over to Staples, get them to run another couple of copies, because I still had 2 sheets of decal film. So I head on over there and go to the counter, say, can you please make another copy of this for me? And they're like, we don't do that. We don't use foreign paper in our machines. And I'm saying, well, you did this for me on Sunday. No, we didn't. The manager comes over and says, none of my people would have run this in their machine, in our machines. So, not really any point in arguing with them. So, it's kind of discouraged for a couple days, and then I headed over to a smaller independent shop. They wouldn't run it either, and basically the crux of it is the companies that either lease them the photocopiers or perform the service on them say, look, if you put a piece of paper in here and it fouls up the works, we're not gonna honor our warranty. So the third place I went to here in London was a place called Mercury Blueprinting, and I explained the problem there, and I said I just need these photocopies run. And there the woman behind the counter says, oh, okay, well, let me go talk to, I can't remember his name. She disappears, and I'm thinking, uh-oh, this is where she comes back and says they won't run it. A couple minutes later, she comes back, she's run both copies. She's like, oh, it just worked fine. And I'm like, oh, your machine didn't blow up or catch fire or anything? So she said, no, there's no problems or anything like that. So at least here in London, Mercury Blueprinting, they were willing to run the decal film through their photocopy machine, and they weren't afraid to have me give them a shout out. So that was a little bit of a setback, slowed me down for a few days, certainly made me a little discouraged. So hopefully, I now have basically 6 layers I can put on. So this door has 3 layers. This one has 2 layers. So we'll see if the density builds up with more layers and overall it ends up looking better. Now I'm going to be heavily weathering this. I'm going to be putting a lot of rust in the corners and things, but I still want it to look fairly clear. if you're curious about the color density here, let's see if I can get a good line up here. There we go. Underneath the air cleaner, you can see it's quite a bit paler. That only has one layer of decal, whereas the door has 3, and the side of the hood that's currently reacting to the decal set, as I try to, the Solva set there, it has 2 layers. So you can see that one layer just was not going to look very good at all. And of course I've started putting the decals on the air cleaner as well. I am aware that the actual truck had a white Chrysler logo there, but I can't print white, at least not without an Alps printer. Alright, that is 4 layers of decal film on the door in order to tone down that white behind. I know it's not still 100% effective, but I'm going to be doing some weathering on it. You can see I've got the Chrysler logo on the lube finder, and the louvers were actually so deep that every time I put decal film on, it would crack in the valleys. So what I ended up doing is putting very small strips of decal film just in the valleys and then allowing them to set into the valleys, and that seems to have gotten rid of most of it. And if you recall looking at the actual video of the truck, there is plenty of rust in this area. So even though I'm not planning on doing it quite as crusty as the museum truck, I think there's still a fair amount of scope for doing rusting and covering up some of our decal problems. Because I talked over with Natasha, and we were thinking probably by the time I put another 2 layers of decal film on, the lettering was going to start getting fuzzy. As I mentioned before, the logo on the air cleaner and the lube finder was supposed to be white. I don't have the ability to do white decals. Once again, an Alps printer, because I know somebody's going to put in the comments and say, you know, if you get an Alps printer, I don't have one. So I did those logos in blue, and I don't think that is an unreasonable compromise to make to get the model done. As I may have mentioned earlier, can't remember now, I need some pulleys. I need about 4 large pulleys, and I need 2 smaller ones. So what I'm trying to create here is, if we can get a good focus on it, focus. What I'm trying to create here is these little, I don't know, vanilla Oreo cookies, basically. And what this is 2 discs of wood from a craft store, and joining them, and I guess I should have done this before I put the glue in. I've done a very small slice of this plastic tubing. Then, if I can pick it up without making a mess of it here, you can see what I've done is I've filled the space with white glue, and I'm going to make sure that I put enough white glue in there that it touches the piece of wood that goes on the top. So in fact, when the white glue dries, it will trap that piece of plastic in there, and we're not counting on white glue attaching to plastic. So I need 4 of these, and I still haven't come up with how I'm doing the smaller pulleys. These are the smaller pulleys. They're going to be going on the end of the boom, and they're probably smaller than they should be, but I didn't really have an intermediate size between these and the big pulleys. So basically, you've got 1/4 inch plastic discs that have been used by using a center punch, and then a smaller diameter piece of tubing in between to give these pulleys. So as I sat down to edit this particular episode, I realized that all the material I had ready to go was going to result in an episode that was way longer than 30 minutes, probably 40 minutes. And I try to keep my videos to 20 minutes or less, with maybe 25 minutes being the maximum. So I'm going to cut this episode off right here and save the rest for hopefully the final episode. So thanks for watching, and until next time, just keep on modeling.